This is the example walkthrough problem for liquidity ratios. And liquidity ratios are important for us to understand and analyze because they represent how fast or how able a company is to repay their short-term debts. And another way of looking at this is interpreting the term liquid, which represents the way that resources and the ability for resources to be converted into cash. And so we're going to be looking at different ratios like current ratio, quick ratio, the times interest earned or tie ratio, cash build, and cash burn. And starting off, we can go with our current assets over current liabilities to solve for our current ratio. And the reason we focus on current assets and current liabilities is because these aspects are focused more on the short term. And for example, with current assets, things like cash, accounts receivable, and inventory are much easier to convert into cash and can happen much quicker than something like net property, plant, and equipment. Because equipment and land, for example, are much harder to convert into cash in a short period of time. So we can take our total current assets divided by our total current liabilities, and we get our current ratio of 2.98. And the next ratio we can talk about is the quick ratio, which is very similar to the current ratio, except we factor out inventory. And we do that because sometimes inventory is a little less liquid. It sometimes can be harder to convert into cash. It can take longer, and so we sometimes need an idea of focusing only on things that are a little more liquid for the company. So we can take our current assets minus our inventory and divide by our current liabilities. And we see that the quick ratio is 2.12. And then moving on, we can go to our times interest earned ratio, which is our EBITDA, or our adjusted EBIT for depreciation and amortization, and our interest expense. So we can start with our adjusted EBIT or EBITDA, and the way we do that is we take our EBIT or operating income and we add back in depreciation, because depreciation is a non-cash expenditure, and sometimes we just want to, and EBITDA will give us a better idea for a company when you factor that out. And so we can take that and divide by our interest expense, and so we find our interest expense. And this represents for every dollar of interest that the company has, they have $71 of EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so now we can move on to our cash build, which is our revenues minus our accounts receivable for the year 1 minus our accounts receivable in year 0. We can see that their cash build is $61,900 for this year. And we can move on to then calculate our cash burn. Obviously, this equation is a little more complex than the cash burn or build, because there are many more ways for a company to burn their cash rather than to build it. And so this just takes into account all the ways that a company can burn their cash. And so we start off by going with our operating expenses in the year 1, subtracting our depreciation and amortization, adding in our interest and taxes, and then adding to that our inventory 1 minus our inventory 0, and then subtracting our current liabilities 1 minus current liabilities 0, and then adding our fixed assets 1 minus fixed assets 0 plus depreciation and amortization. So we take our fixed assets, and fixed assets are going to be something like plant, property, and equipment. These things are just a little more fixed in terms when you compare them to things like accounts receivable. These things are a little less liquid and considered to be more of a long-term asset for the company. And so then we take our fixed assets 1 minus our fixed assets 0. We add our depreciation back in. And we can see that in this year, the company burned $11,550 of cash. So these are just a few different ways to analyze and look at the liquidity of a company and the ability for them to pay their short-term responsibilities and debts back.
My name is Rick Haskell, and I'd like to thank you for watching this video as part of the Bill and Vieve Gore School of Business's Business Certificate series. I'm a finance professor in the business school, where I'm also the director for the college's Center for Financial Wellness. The Business Certificate Series is offered through the Center as part of our outreach through the Gore School of Business. You can follow us on social media through Westminster's Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook pages. You can use the QR codes provided or simply go to these websites. Thank you.